Hi, and welcome back to the Complicated Kids podcast. I'm your host, Gabriele Nicolet. I am a toddler whisperer, a speech therapist, and a parent coach. And today I have Holly Britton with me. Holly, welcome.
Thank you.
We are going to talk all about handwriting today, which actually I'm super excited about. But before we do that, would you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Holly Britton. I'm very excited to be here. I've listened to several of your episodes and enjoy it very much, and happy to address your audience. I work now as a handwriting specialist, having founded and designed a product for early learners called Squiggle Squad. I did this after coming out of a third, fourth, fifth grade classroom where I was just becoming increasingly frustrated that the kids coming up the academic pipeline didn't have the fundamental skills that I needed them to have if I were going to teach those higher level learning skills to them. And about the time halfway through the year, COVID happened. I kind of put my career at a crossroads, considered going in to get my doctorate, and just really thought, with time that I have left in life, I really want to see the science that is already out there meet the teachers and parents in the classrooms and homes, and how can I advocate for that? And prior, I had done some coaching in kindergarten, some classroom time in K and first grade. And I was also seeing the other end, those first steps towards handwriting instruction. And I knew that, having seen both ends now, that there were some big gaps and there were places that people could step in and fill these holes. And it actually wouldn't be too complicated. It just had to be intentional. And so that's when I stepped out and made Squiggle Squad.
Okay, so for people who have kind of lost the thread a little bit and they're thinking, what's the big deal?
Yes.
Just give us a list of the higher level skills that you were talking about in fourth, fifth, and third, fourth, and fifth grade
Yes.
that you were
Yeah.
saying. What are the skills that we're asking third, fourth, and fifth graders to do that depend on an ability to form letters?
Great question. So early on, we're forming letters and words mostly by phonics and code. As they get older, and of course, none of this is linear, it's happening, like a web, language acquisition, that is. So now we're getting into vocabulary, we're getting into comprehension. When the kids start putting their thoughts on paper, they have to learn to order those thoughts. So we're thinking about syntax and grammar. We're thinking about pulling ideas, summarizing, paraphrasing. And I liked to integrate that with my classroom instruction. So if I'm teaching history or I'm teaching science, I'm also integrating the writing skills that go alongside that, not only to teach them writing, which I intentionally plan, but also that I'm teaching them the subject through writing. And I can't teach them the subject through writing if they can't write. And you probably know this. I'm sure your audience is very familiar with the whole idea of working memory. And that gets gummed up with transcription skill production if they don't have that automaticity that we need them to have early on in their early elementary school years.
That's okay. This is so amazing. Basically, what you're saying, and we're going to go into greater depth because this is fascinating to me as well. If we don't have automaticity, meaning if we haven't put in the time to teach the hand and the brain to communicate about, for example, how one writes an F, the letter F, in all of the different ways in which it appears in a word
Right,
or in a sentence.
right.
The process of doing that will impede our ability to learn history because our working memory is, I love the word term gummed up, as you say, is stuck on how do we make this shape versus how do we learn this concept. And I'm going to ask you about this in a second, but the image that just came into my mind was tying your shoes. when we sit down to tie our shoes, we are not thinking about first I do the knot, then I make the bow. When we're learning how to do it, we do that. That's absolutely what we do. But the way that the brain works is to chunk that information. Once we have all those steps in that order, the brain chunks that and says, oh, this is a procedure. Go over here in procedural memory. Yep. And stay over there because it frees up resources. So first of all, why are we not teaching kids how to form letters explicitly? And just walk us through, and this is a little bit redundant, but also not, what happens to kids who don't learn how to form letters in kindergarten and first grade?
Okay, great questions. Let's see. Why aren't we doing it? I think that every teacher would probably give you a slightly different answer, but I can tell you from my experience and my observations, what I think is going on is that we have lost sight of the fact that handwriting, encoding language from our brain to our hand is not acquired naturally the way other things are acquired, like talking or physical activities like walking or facial expressions that we absorb when we watch other humans socializing and interacting. And there's a lot to talk about with regards to neurodivergence in this arena as well. But in terms of just typical developmental progression of children, that encoding skill must be explicitly taught. And I think what's happening in the classrooms, because they're asked to do more and more, the standards are just piling on, and they have less time, less people helping, more kids per teacher, and really, to the point, teachers they've lost sight of the fact that they actually have to teach it. They themselves don't know that. It's not addressed in teacher colleges. I got my
what? I'm horrified.
I know, you're not alone. Most parents expect that this is being explicitly taught, and most teachers, I think, when they give a kid a workbook and they send them to the writing center and they say, practice writing your letters, they think that's explicit instruction, or they don't understand that it's not enough for a child to go back and draw a shape that's called a B rather than write a letter that is part of a word. And so when we don't back up to those incremental steps, the child loses. The child does not develop the skills he or she needs to develop.
Oof. Okay, now you mentioned neurodivergence. So we know, for example, in children with speech and language delays, that the process of either speaking or understanding, or both, is impacted. And what we also know from research is that reading and writing can also be impacted. If you've got a child with sensory processing issues, we also know they might be having trouble feeling their extremities or understanding where their extremities are in space. And they also may have difficulty controlling the motor actions. And so it just strikes me, and I know this is not your area of expertise necessarily, but it strikes me that this becomes even more important if you've got any kind of neurodivergence happening.
And depending on the case, even more important, because let's say that our kiddo has a processing problem outside of kinesthetic. Let's say that they do well motorically speaking. Why not use that for language acquisition? Why not tap into that instead of, forcing biology or trying to, use biology in a way that they're impaired? Because we know that the brain incorporates those areas. The brain is constantly looking for connection. And when we can find connection between our senses and our processing centers, we are going to get more understanding and better results. So it's up to the parents and the educators to really come in from the angle that best suits that child's individual needs.
what is wrong or what might be wrong with putting in let's say a second grader, I'll put them right in the middle, into their IEP or their 504 that they need to be able to type responses instead of write them?
Reword the question just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a lot of kiddos that I know whose IEPs and or 504s stipulate that they must have access to typing because
Okay.
they don't know how to write, and the act of writing is very challenging for them. And I'm not sure, again, some of this is obviously, if you have cerebral palsy, we're not asking you to hold a pencil necessarily. We might be, but right. So there are different kind of aspects to this, but I do see like access to typing as a substitute for writing. I don't know. Do you have opinions about that? And maybe you don't, and that's fine.
I think it is individual by individual, and I think it has a lot to do with your objectives for that child and their language usage. Mm-hmm. So if, for example, they have motor problems and they can't hold a pencil, typing is a wonderful way to do it. So we have two major transcriptions modes that we can use: handwriting, namely handwriting. So words on paper using your hand and a writing implement, or typing, which is considered an imprint mode of. So instead of tracing through the letters, you are pressing the letter. That should all be considered when writing up a plan for your IEP student. If that child cannot trace a letter, and by trace, I don't necessarily mean like, trace a line. I mean the act of writing through letters. If they can't do that, then you're going to have to pivot and figure out where their processing struggles are happening, and again, how best to come in from a different angle. It's no less a problem, however, if as you move up the pipeline, they still don't have those transcription skills. So in our public schools, we're actually not teaching keyboarding very well either. And
Correct.
So not only did I have fifth graders that could not write by hand, I had fifth graders that could not type. So their typing was henpecking. If I was lucky with two fingers, sometimes with one. And by the time you get up to fifth grade, try writing an essay like that. There is no brain flow. They're completely stuck in working memory, trying to get their words spelled right on the computer or on paper.
I mean, really what you're saying is it's impeding self-expression.
Yeah. Communication.
Written.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Okay. How should we be teaching writing and or typing in school, and when?
Okay. I have a lot of opinions on this.
Bring them. This is the world according to Holly. If we ran the world, what would happen?
If I started my own school, what would I do? Well, I did have opportunity as a curriculum director to implement this strategy in mostly typically developing students of fairly small-ish classes with really good teachers. So this might be a more ideal situation that would need to be tweaked according to the school. A lot of standards and admin and schools expect kids to start language super early. And frankly, parents are excited when their kids like to see letters, when they start sounding things out. So for me to say, oh, we should wait to write until they're 5 or 6 years old, I don't think that's necessary. I have a 4.5-year-old granddaughter who absolutely loves forming her letters. Her mom is an amazing teacher, and there's just absolutely nothing wrong with her trying to do that. So I'm all about meeting the child where they're at and helping them reach their potential. So if you're starting early, there's a really good way to remember how to incrementally bring them up the developmental progression in writing. And that is to remember it is two broad parts. It is motor skill and it is cognitive skill. And sometimes you need to break those apart instead of trying to put them together all the time. So if those kids are really little, we're really going to have to keep in mind their need for hand strength, dexterity, eye-hand coordination. They're still developing those visuospatial skills, where to put the pencil on the paper, how to actually meet the tip of the pencil on the line where it's supposed to start. Those are things that are a little bit more complicated for little hands and little brains. As you go, so I would say as a 4-year-old, or what we call here in California TK, or transitional kindergarten, we're really working on the motor skills. You can start with large motor skills and move down to the more fine-tuned motor skills as they get ready. On the other hand, you're working on the cognitive skills of reading and writing, which have to do with naming letters, knowing the sounds of the letters, knowing, seeing them in a book and knowing that we're reading left to right, all of those things that you do with your eyes and your ears and your mouth, and the accents and the cadence and all of that comes from reading aloud. You're also teaching them writing, because writing is communication. So we're teaching them to speak the words that they're learning. So they're learning vocabulary, they're gaining background knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. All that's going into writing. Handwriting is the physical act of getting it from your brain onto paper. So that is more a motor skill, first and foremost, a motor skill. So when it comes to that, the thing that changes the most as they go from young to old are the size of your guidelines and the speed of your production. So at the very beginning, you can imagine, because they're the finest of motor skills is not yet developed, we want a little bit bigger lines. And you teach them where to start, you teach them the direction, and you teach them where to stop. A lot of times teachers will, let's take the letter L, lowercase letter L, for example, and it's top to bottom. A lot of kids, of course, go bottom to top, but we need that repetition to get the directionality correct. And it's not just start your pencil at the dot, but it's stop your pencil at the bottom. That's just as much part of the motor skill as the starting and the direction. And that's because I see a lot of kids that just kind of flop their way through that letter, not just the L, but a lot of them. So we're really teaching them the coordination, and then moving up the pipeline. The guidelines get smaller, the pacing gets a little faster, and of course we start attaching the letters so that we're building words, so that you're working then on spacing your letters and your words. So that's all part of handwriting. It's why it can't all happen at one time. They're learning the shape and its name. They're learning how to form it correctly. They're learning where to put it on the line. They're learning the relationship between a tall and a short letter, which up in 5th grade, I was getting, lowercase letter T was the same size as the lowercase letter R. There wasn't any differentiation, and we'll throw a capital in the middle of it, whatever word we feel like, because we like writing the A capital better than we like writing it lowercase. So all of those are just habitual acts that are formed when the kids are super, super young. And no teacher that I know over the age of 2nd grade deals with it after that.
It's so interesting. I mean, it's just really fascinating to me, to your point, right? It is not embedded to learn to write. It's an extra skill. Why are we treating it as if it's innate?
Yeah.
It's not innate. And so just that explicit instruction. I just want to throw in Holly and Gabriele's perfect spelling world. Children would not actually say the name of the letter. They would say the sound that the letter makes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I say that a lot. I will say, however, that it's very hard. I don't have a strong opinion on this. I just know that naming a shape is more concrete and easier for a very young child. So you could teach a 3-year-old that. You could teach a 3-year-old that A says A, that's fine. And they would get it. They just won't exactly understand the meaning, and they won't put it together with words and how to spell them until much later. So yeah, there's definitely research on both sides of that. I taught all my kids by sound. So all my kids learned to write the letter, say the sound, and sometimes multiple sounds. But I do know that teaching them the letter names can be very helpful later as well. Yeah. That's absorbed a little bit better as they get older. Yeah.
I do want to speak to, we are obviously talking, number one, we're talking about the general population in this conversation by and large, and then we're
Yeah.
kind of carving out, cases where other considerations might be made. But notice the title of this podcast, the name of this podcast is Complicated Kids, right? But it's also the part of the reason I use the word complicated is because writing is complicated.
Yes.
Speaking is complicated. Language is complicated. It's embedding upon embedding upon embedding, layer on layer. And if this layer is not in place, the next layer is not coming to you very easily. And so when we as parents and educators wonder why kids are struggling, it's my hope that this kind of conversation, in this case about handwriting, helps to inform that number one, it's complicated. Number two, let's look again. Let's look underneath. Let's look at something else, because we know that there are lots of moving parts here.
That's right. And it's probably good for our parents and teachers of neurodivergent kiddos to know that handwriting does not have to look like a pencil on paper. It's a movement through letters, and that may look really different. I was a sign language interpreter for years, and that's another form of making letters visible. It's the only other form I know, by the way. I mean, there's the computer, there's the handwriting, and as far as I'm concerned, the ASL or sign language that you can get your thoughts visible to the outside world. And yeah, those kiddos that have different struggles in trying to produce that need the different tools in their toolbox. And if handwriting can be one of those, or at least some modification of handwriting can be made to help them express themselves, then by all means consider the kinesthetic side of language as well.
Okay, and so Squiggle Squad.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's fun to just
say that
say
5 times fast.
Squiggle Squad was born kind of out of COVID, out of a transition, out of this desire to kind of bring handwriting, it sounds like, bring motricity to people. And so walk us through, like, what is it? How do people get it? Who is it for?
So yes, thank you for asking. I did design it for teachers and parents and kids. And the design features of every single design feature in this program speaks to a different instructional need. And sometimes that need is for the teacher, and sometimes that need is for the kiddo. I break it apart. We break it apart. I have a wonderful little team that helps me roll this out. Motor skill, cognitive, and the kids practice those strokes, 5 strokes in isolation. So the Squiggle Squad are animals that represent the 5 strokes that you'll need to make manuscript letters. Okay. And as they get more and more comfortable with drawing those strokes on the lines, on the guidelines provided, then the animals come together and play and make the letters that you're trying to teach them. So if they, for example, practiced Bubbles the bunny in a counterclockwise circle, which is very hard for a child, by the way, atypical and otherwise, they're pushing up and around, pushing up and around. I'm not going to ask them to write a more complicated letter till I know they can do that and they know my expectations. So if I tell them up and around, but they don't know what I mean, then I'm going to need to program that in. If I tell them start just below the dotted line and they are brand new to language and guidelines and they've never seen a person hold a pencil and push the pencil up and around, I need to take a little bit of time to show them what I mean when I say that. And then they practice it, much like you'd practice a sport or an instrument. You pull it apart, you practice that motor skill, and then you put it all together. You don't come right out with the song and say, I want you to play this song. You say, I want you to play these notes. And so that's basically what we're doing. Give the kiddo an opportunity. Of course, we pair it with a cute little animal that they love. They really get to know the little animals, and so they feel more comfortable and they feel more confident because I'm asking them to do something they know how to do. If I ask them to write the letter K, There's a whole lot of confusion. It goes through their brain really fast, and they're pleasers. They want to make you happy. They want to do what they're supposed to do, but they can't figure it out. They can't find that meaning right away. And so a lot of them give up. Some stick with it longer than others. Others find coping mechanisms because they can't figure out what you're trying to ask. We want to prevent that. So we're going to back it way up. We're going to incrementally introduce the pieces of the puzzle that they're going to need to put the puzzle together. And then we're going to ask them to start constructing that puzzle.
And what age group is your program targeted at?
It's really right now, it's age 4 through 8. Second grade is encouraged to do what we call next level learning. We try not to put the grade levels on there because they're learning to write by hand is very much a progression that kids kind of ebb and flow up and down that progression. And so if you're in second grade and you need to use next level learning, we didn't want it to say first grade necessarily. And so so you would do that. You would start, we have first graders that are doing our kindergarten level. We have second graders that do our first grade level. But if you've done it up the pipeline starting at age 4 or 5 in kindergarten, then they're ready to progress, and it's not complicated for them.
And if people want to learn more about Squiggle Squad and you, what do they do?
They can find me at squigglesquad.com. I'm also Squiggle Squad Handwriting on Instagram, and we have contact forms there. You're welcome to call or email, and it's either going to be me or Ellie that answers your call.
Perfect. We will link to all of that in the show notes. Holly Britton, thanks so much for being here.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.